Before you close your eyes tonight, understand one thing. Your mind isn't just resting when you sleep. It's listening. It's reorganizing, repairing, rewriting, deciding what tomorrow's version of you will look like. And the truth is harsh. Most people go to sleep with the same thoughts that are destroying their confidence, their ambition, and their inner peace. They fall asleep replaying the same insecurities, the same failures, the same fears, and then they're surprised when they wake up feeling like the same person. Not tonight. Tonight you're going to feed your mind something different. Tonight you're going to stop pouring poison into your subconscious and start planting something powerful. So breathe, settle, let your body melt into stillness, let your mind open, because what you're about to hear is not motivation. It's not hype. This is a quiet reprogramming, a deep shift. Your subconscious absorbs everything you repeat, everything you dwell on, everything you tolerate. Tonight, we break that cycle. Let's begin. 1. Your subconscious never sleeps. Your body sleeps, but your subconscious doesn't set. You close your eyes, your muscles relax, your breathing slows, but the deepest part of your mind remains wide awake. It doesn't rest. It doesn't pause. It doesn't take a night off because you feel tired. It's always active, always processing, always reorganizing the information you gave it during the day. And here sips the uncomfortable reality. What you feed your subconscious becomes the architecture of your life. People underestimate this, not because they're stupid, but because no one ever taught them how the mind actually works. You've gone through life believing your thoughts come and go, as if they disappear when you stop paying attention to them. But the mind doesn't work that way. Every thought leaves an imprint. Every belief becomes a tiny instruction. Every emotional reaction becomes part of your programming. Your subconscious is like wet cement. Whatever lands on it, hard enough or often enough, becomes permanent. And for years you've been pouring in the wrong things. Not intentionally, not maliciously, just unconsciously, the same way everyone does. You've been filling your subconscious with quiet, subtle limitations. Not sentences you speak out loud, but sentences you live. Accept not good enough. I always screw things up. I'm probably going to fail again. Things don't work out for me. Stuck. You don't stand in front of a mirror and say these things. You say them through hesitation. You say them through not trying. You say them through staying silent when you should speak. You say them every time you shrink yourself to avoid being judged. You say them by choosing comfort over progress. You say them by believing your past more than your potential. These are not conscious beliefs. They're emotional defaults, patterns created by repetition, by fear, by disappointment, by the people who underestimated you, by the memories that stayed longer than they should have. And your subconscious, loyal and obedient, recorded every one of those patterns as truth, not because they were true, but because you kept repeating them. That's how the subconscious works. It doesn't ask, is this belief accurate? It asks, is this belief familiar? If something is familiar, it accepts it. If something is repeated, it absorbs it. If something feels emotionally strong, it stores it permanently. That means you've carried around beliefs that never came from your deepest self. Beliefs formed by people who projected their own fears onto you. Beliefs formed by moments you didn't know how to handle. Beliefs formed when you were younger, more fragile, and more easily influenced. So every night, while your body shuts down, your subconscious reviews those beliefs. It strengthens them. It reorganizes them. It uses them to predict tomorrow's version of you. The way you wake up, the way you think, the way you react, all of it is shaped by what your subconscious rehearsed during the night. This is why you wake up feeling the same. This is why patterns repeat. This is why you feel stuck, even when you want to change. It sits not because you incapable. It's because your subconscious is running outdated programming. You've been carrying a version of yourself that no longer matches who you're trying to become. The good news? Your subconscious is programmable. And tonight, you stir rewriting the script. Because the truth is this: your subconscious isn't your enemy. It's not trying to sabotage you. It's simply following the instructions you've given it, intentionally or unintentionally. It's been operating according to the emotional template created by your past experiences. But your past is not a prophecy. It sits, not a fixed destiny. It sits, not the final version of you. Your subconscious is always listening, which means it's always available for reprogramming. Tonight you teach it a new language, a new narrative, a new pattern. It can repeat in place of the old ones. Because the old ones are tired. They are outdated. They belong to a version of you that was operating with less knowledge, less confidence, less self-awareness, and less understanding of who you could become. You are not who you were last year. You are not who you were 5 years ago. You are not the child who internalized other people's words. You are not the teenager who felt unseen. You are not the adult who lived in survival mode, because you didn't know anything better. Your subconscious was trained by your past, but your past has no authority over your next chapter unless you let it. And tonight, you stop letting it. Tonight your subconscious receives new instructions, not loud, not forced, not aggressive, but gentle, repetitive, and emotionally steady. The exact kind of input it responds to most powerfully. So breathe, slow down, ease your body into softness. Because your subconscious is paying attention. This is the moment where old patterns lose their power. Not by fighting them, but by replacing them. The wrong beliefs were planted slowly over time, through repetition, emotion, and environment. Now you reverse that process the same way. Repetition, emotion, environment. You're creating an internal environment that supports your growth rather than suffocates it. This is where you begin feeding your mind something worth becoming. You speak to your subconscious through feeling, not through force, through consistency, not through perfection, through clarity, not through pressure. You remind it, again and again, that you are allowed to evolve, allowed to change, allowed to rise above the version of you that was shaped by circumstances instead of intention. Your subconscious responds to signals of identity. So tonight you send new signals. I am not who I used to be. I am allowed to outgrow what once controlled me. I said I'm allowed to release the beliefs that never belonged to me. I am capable of more than I have shown myself. I deserve progress. I deserve clarity. I deserve peace. I deserve a life that matches my potential. These are not affirmations. These are identity cues, blueprints, seeds for the subconscious to reorganize itself around. When you repeatedly expose your mind to a new identity, it begins to adopt it as truth, not because you force it, but because the subconscious seeks consistency. And once it sees a new narrative repeated often enough, it rewires the emotional associations that define your behavior. This is how transformation actually works. Not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually, silently, through a shift in internal identity. You've been living as a version of yourself created by accident. Now you begin creating a version of yourself by design. Your subconscious is listening to every word. More importantly, it's listening to the meaning behind them. The calm certainty in your breathing, the quiet acceptance settling in your chest, the shift in how you perceive yourself. These internal cues matter more than any external force. Because your life is a reflection of your internal conversation. You want to change your life. Change what you feed your subconscious at night. This is the time when it's most open, most receptive, most ready to absorb new programming. You're bypassing resistance. You're bypassing insecurity. You're bypassing overthinking. You're speaking directly to the control center of your identity. And tonight, you telling it. You done repeating the old patterns. You done holding on to the wrong beliefs. You done dragging the older version of me into my future. You sit done treating temporary experiences as permanent truths. You sit done misinterpreting my silence as weakness. You're giving your subconscious permission to upgrade. Think of how much your mind has endured. Stress, pressure, failure, judgment, comparison, loneliness, expectations, disappointments, all the quiet moments that reshaped you without your permission. Your subconscious held on to them because it didn't know what else to do, not because it wanted to keep you small, but because the familiar always feels safer than the unknown. But you is safe now. You st calmer. You're edging more aware. You're thinking consciously, instead of reacting emotionally. Your subconscious can finally let go. Let go of the limitations. Let go of the shame. Let go of the self-doubt. Let go of the memories that no longer define you. Let go of the identity that never truly belonged to you. You are feeding your mind something cleaner, something stronger, something aligned with where you're going, not where you've been. Your subconscious doesn't sit sleep, so give it something worth processing. Tonight, you reintroduce yourself to yourself. Not the wounded version, not the confused version, not the insecure version, not the version shaped by survival, but the version shaped by intention. You whisper new truth into your subconscious. I say I'm allowed to grow. I am allowed to change. I'm allowed to become someone I've never been before. I'm allowed to rewrite my future. And your subconscious listens. It absorbs. It reorganizes. It prepares the blueprint for the next evolution of you. This is how every powerful transformation begins. Not in loud motivation, but in quiet reprogramming. Tonight, you finally start feeding your mind something worth becoming. 2. Your identity is a story you keep telling yourself. Your identity is not built from your achievements, your failures, your experiences, or your memories. Those things influence you, yes, but they don't define you. What defines you is the interpretation you repeat about those experiences. It's the ongoing internal story you whisper to yourself, consciously and unconsciously, day after day, year after year, until the repetition becomes so familiar that you forget it's a story at all. You mistake it for truth. You mistake it for personality. But personality is nothing more than practiced identity. And identity is nothing more than the narrative loop your mind has rehearsed for so long that your brain treats it as solid fact. Most people never examine their identity. They simply inherit it. They inherit stories about who they are from their childhood environment, from emotionally charged moments they didn't know how to process, from the expectations of people who didn't fully understand them, from teachers who judged too quickly, from friends who spoke carelessly, from failures that happened in the wrong place at the wrong time, from wounds that lingered because they never knew how to heal. These stories sink into the subconscious, because the subconscious absorbs anything that is repeated strongly enough or emotionally enough. And once it absorbs it, it constructs a worldview that supports that story. This is why identity feels so real, not because it is true, but because your subconscious filters everything through it. If your internal story is, I'm not confident, your mind will highlight every moment that reinforces that belief, and quietly ignore every moment that contradicts it. If your internal story is, I'm always the one who gets hurt, your mind will automatically categorize neutral situations as threats, even when they're not. If your internal story is, I'm not good enough, you will sabotage opportunities long before you consciously realize what you're doing. It's not because you're weak, it's because your subconscious is following the script you've given it. This is why people feel stuck. They change their goals, they change their habits, they change their environment, but they don't change the story. So even if the external world shifts, their internal world drags them back into the same patterns. Your life cannot exceed the identity your subconscious believes is normal. It will not allow you to rise above the story it memorized, because the subconscious values familiarity over progress. It would rather keep you in a painful place that feels predictable than risk stepping into a better place that feels unfamiliar. That's how strong identity is. It can make a person fear their own potential simply because it doesn't match the story they've rehearsed. Your identity was shaped quietly. It was shaped at times when you weren't aware of the shaping process. It was shaped when someone made you feel small, and you mistook that moment for a universal truth. It was shaped when you failed once, and believed you were a failure entirely. It was shaped when you weren't chosen, or when you tried and didn't succeed, or when you compared yourself to someone else and walked away thinking you were permanently behind. These moments didn't define you, but your interpretation of them did. The mind is powerful, but it is also obedient. If you tell it the same story long enough, it will build your entire identity around it. Even if the story was formed by a past version of you that had less awareness, less wisdom, less emotional strength, and far fewer tools than the version of you listening right now. And that's the part people never truly grasp. Your identity might be outdated. It might be built on beliefs that belong to the child you once were, not the adult you've become. It might be built on past environments that no longer exist. It might be built on relationships you've already outgrown. It might be built on fears that no longer serve you. Yet your subconscious keeps repeating it because you never replaced the story. Identity is not permanent. It is not fixed. It is not carved into stone. It is plastic, adaptable, fluid, but only if you recognize it as a story rather than a fate. The problem is that most people never challenge their identity because they think questioning it means something is wrong with them. But questioning identity is not a sign of dysfunction. It is a sign of awakening. It means you are finally becoming conscious of the narratives you absorbed unconsciously. It means you're starting to separate who you truly are from who you were taught to be. It means you're stepping into your own mind with honesty instead of autopilot. Think about how many choices you've made, not because they were right for you, but because they matched your narrative. Think about the opportunities you walked away from because your story told you you weren't ready. Think about the people you allowed into your life because your story told you that you didn't deserve better. Think about the dreams you never pursued because your story told you they weren't realistic. Think about how many times you felt pulled toward a better version of yourself, but stayed small because your story insisted that smallness was your home. This is the power of identity. It shapes your perception, your behavior, your emotional reactions, your relationships, your expectations, and your entire sense of possibility. But here's the part that matters. Since identity is a story, it can be rewritten. Not instantly, not dramatically, not through force, but through repetition, awareness, and emotional alignment, the same way it was written in the first place. You don't erase the old story by fighting it. You erase it by replacing it with a better one. You don't argue with the subconscious. You retrain it. You don't demand a new identity. You teach it a new identity through consistent emotional experience. That's how identity shifts. Internally, quietly, organically. Tonight, you begin feeding your subconscious a different storyline. A story that matches who you want to become, not who you used to be. A story grounded in possibility rather than limitation. A story that reflects your potential instead of your past. A story that recognizes your ability to grow rather than your fear of failing. A story that acknowledges your strength rather than your insecurity. A story that gives you the freedom to evolve. Your subconscious is listening right now. It's absorbing the tone, the emotions, the imagery, the beliefs behind every sentence. It's trying to make sense of what you want it to become. Identity rewrites itself when you consistently expose your mind to a truth that feels emotionally real. So let the following message sink deeply into the part of you that shapes your future. You do not have to remain loyal to an outdated identity. You do not have to keep defending a narrative that limits you. You do not have to keep living inside a story that was written during a time in your life that no longer represents who you are. You are allowed to outgrow the old version of yourself without guilt, without permission, without apology. This is not about becoming someone new overnight. It's about releasing the lie that you are only allowed to be who you've always been. It's about allowing your subconscious to consider the possibility that you are capable of more than the story suggests. Identity is not who you truly are. It's who you've repeated yourself into becoming, and repetition works both ways. The same mechanism that created the limiting identity can create a liberating one. You are not trapped. You are not fixed. You are not static. You are a constantly evolving being who has the power to rewrite the story at any moment. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, your subconscious is ready to listen. It is ready to loosen its grip on the old narrative. It is ready to reorganize its structure around a new self-concept. It is ready to accept that your identity is not a prison. It is a script, and scripts can be revised. Now sink into that truth. Let it settle inside your mind. Let it reshape the way you view yourself. Because the longer you let this truth echo through your subconscious, the faster the old identity dissolves. You are not the story you were told. You are the story you choose to tell from this moment forward. 3. Your thoughts are not commands. You've lived most of your life assuming that the thoughts inside your head deserve your obedience, as if every idea that appears in your mind automatically represents truth, reality, or your actual intentions. But the mind is not a dictator, and your thoughts are not orders. They're signals, suggestions, possibilities. Some are accurate, some are nonsense, some are echoes of old wounds, some are survival mechanisms that no longer apply, and some are nothing more than electrical noise passing through your brain, because it's trying to process unresolved emotions. The mistake is not that you have negative thoughts. The mistake is believing them. Your mind generates thousands of thoughts every single day, and the vast majority are recycled impressions from the past, shaped by fears, habits, patterns, emotional memory, and the identity you've unconsciously rehearsed. Your brain doesn't ask for your approval before sending you a thought. It simply throws them into your awareness like waves hitting the shore. Some waves are calm, some are violent, some come from storms that happened years ago. But the presence of a wave doesn't mean you must let it carry you away. Thinking a thought doesn't make it true. Feeling a thought doesn't make it destiny. Repeating a thought doesn't make it your identity. Yet this is exactly where people get trapped. They confuse mental activity with truth. The subconscious stores everything, even the emotional debris you thought you left behind. So your mind will sometimes remind you of fears you no longer identify with, simply because those neural pathways still exist. It will send you thoughts based on outdated programming, old insecurities, old pains, old mistakes. And because you've never been taught to question your thoughts, you accept them as commands. You start acting like they're instructions to follow. I'll probably fail again becomes a reason not to try. I'm not good enough becomes a barrier between you and your potential. People will judge me becomes an excuse to stay silent. The thought appears, and you obey it automatically, without realizing that compliance is a choice. Your thoughts are loud because you've rewarded them with attention. Anything you keep feeding grows. Negative thoughts became powerful, not because they were true, but because you kept listening to them as if they carried authority. You turned passing suggestions into personal beliefs. The mind said, "What if you fail?" And instead of saying maybe, maybe not, you said, "You're right, I probably will." The mind said, "You're not enough." And instead of questioning it, you agreed. The mind said, "Stay safe, stay quiet, stay small," and you obeyed. Not because the thought was wise, but because it was familiar. Familiarity is dangerous. The mind is addicted to what feels known, even if what feels known is limiting. So your intrusive thoughts aren't evidence of who you are. They're echoes of who you used to be. They're habits of thinking, repeated so often that your brain fires them automatically. And because the subconscious is always trying to protect you, it often assumes that fear equals danger. So a thought that begins as simple discomfort becomes interpreted as reality. This is why your mind can convince you that things are worse than they are, that you're less capable than you truly are, and that the world is more threatening than it actually is. The mind is not always trying to sabotage you. Sometimes it's overprotecting you. But here's the shift. Protection is not the same as truth. A fearful thought is not a prophecy. A doubtful thought is not a verdict. A painful thought is not an identity. A repetitive thought is not a law you must follow. You can observe a thought without submitting to it, the same way you can notice a cloud without assuming it controls the weather. But because no one taught you to separate thoughts from identity, you treat them like commands from some internal authority, as if you must comply or something terrible will happen. Yet the moment you recognize that a thought is just a suggestion, you regain power. The anxiety, confusion, hesitation, and emotional turbulence you feel aren't caused by the thoughts themselves. They're caused by the meaning you attach to them. When the mind throws a negative thought and you react as if it's truth, you reinforce the neural pathway that created it. When the mind says something harsh and you take it personally, you feed the belief behind the thought. But when you observe it without attachment, without resistance, without panic, the thought loses its power. It becomes what it actually is, a temporary mental event with no inherent authority. People never transform because they try to eliminate negative thoughts. That's impossible. The mind's job is to think constantly, endlessly, automatically. The goal isn't to stop thinking. The goal is to stop obeying. Freedom doesn't come from controlling your thoughts. It comes from refusing to be controlled by them. When a thought appears, you don't need to argue with it. You don't need to attack it. You don't need to analyze it. You simply acknowledge it as mental noise and let it pass. This is the part that sounds simple but feels unfamiliar. Non-reactive awareness. Watching your thoughts without collapsing into them. Observing your mind without becoming what it says. You think this sounds passive, but it's actually the foundation of strength. The most powerful people are not those who never feel doubt or fear. They're the ones who feel those thoughts and keep moving anyway, because they understand that mental chatter is not reality. They've trained themselves to pause between thought and reaction. They've built the capacity to recognize that the mind's first response is often outdated, exaggerated, or completely irrelevant. They don't mistake internal noise for external truth. Right now, your mind is being retrained. By listening to this at night, you're teaching it a new pattern. The pattern of observing rather than absorbing. The more you practice this, the more your subconscious rewires the automatic relationships you have with your own thoughts. The overactive fear pathways weaken, the emotional triggers soften, the anxious loops lose intensity. You create a small but powerful gap between stimulus and response. That gap is where your transformation happens. When you stop treating your thoughts as commands, you stop being controlled by your past. You stop being controlled by what hurt you. You stop being controlled by old insecurities. You stop being controlled by the internal critic, who learned its language from people who had no idea who you truly were. Suddenly, the world becomes less threatening. Decisions feel clearer. Emotional reactions become balanced instead of overwhelming. You become someone who thinks, rather than someone who is controlled by thinking. And here's the truth that will matter for the rest of your life. You do not need every thought to be positive. You only need the negative ones to lose their authority. Once you stop kneeling before your thoughts, they stop determining who you can be. They stop dictating your choices. They stop shaping your identity. They stop controlling your future. You become the observer, not the follower. The witness, not the puppet. The one who chooses which thoughts matter. Your subconscious is absorbing that message right now. It's learning that thoughts are temporary. It's learning to soften emotional reactions. It's learning to separate self-worth from mental noise. It's learning that you are safe even when your mind throws fear at you. It's learning new internal rules, new interpretations, new associations, and those new associations will become your new automatic patterns. The mind will still produce thoughts tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, but they will not define you the way they used to. They will not grip you the way they once did. The old thoughts may still appear, but your relationship with them will be different. You will watch them. You will question them. You will ignore them. You will move past them. And with time, as observing becomes natural, the mind quiets on its own because it no longer receives the reaction that kept feeding it. This is the quiet beginning of freedom, not the removal of thoughts, but the removal of their power over you. 4. What you repeat, you become. You have no idea how much repetition controls your life. People imagine that change comes from motivation, or inspiration, or some sudden powerful moment of clarity. But the truth is far more mechanical, and far less glamorous. You become whatever is repeated the most inside your mind. Your subconscious doesn't choose who you are. It simply mirrors what it sees most consistently. It doesn't care whether what you repeat is empowering or destructive. It doesn't evaluate whether it makes sense. It doesn't question whether the pattern is serving you or harming you. It absorbs repetition like a sponge, absorbs water, without analysis, without hesitation, without judgment. Your entire personality, the way you think, the way you react, the way you interpret situations, the way you respond to conflict, the way you handle opportunities, the way you speak to yourself internally, is built from repetition. If you repeatedly hesitate, you become someone who hesitates. If you repeatedly avoid discomfort, you become someone who fears discomfort. If you repeatedly expect disappointment, you become someone who finds disappointment, even in places where it doesn't exist. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you're not enough, your subconscious rewires itself to treat not enough as the foundation of all your actions. Repetition is powerful, and most people use it against themselves without even knowing it. The human mind is trained through loops. Every belief you hold was once a repeated thought. Every insecurity you have was once a repeated feeling. Every limitation you've accepted was once a repeated internal message you didn't realize you were rehearsing. You didn't become insecure overnight. You didn't become self-critical overnight. You didn't develop fear overnight. These identities were built slowly, piece by piece, through the things you repeatedly told yourself when no one was listening. And because the subconscious doesn't understand your intention, only your repetition, it internalized these patterns as truth. Think about it. How many times have you repeated to yourself, consciously or unconsciously, the idea that you're not capable, or that you're behind, or that you're unworthy, or that success isn't meant for you, or that people like you don't get far, or that you're going to fail again, because you failed once? These aren't random thoughts, they are repeated stories. And because you've repeated them so often, they became your emotional baseline. They became the lens through which you interpret everything that happens to you. They became the filter that shapes your decisions. They became the background noise that influences every moment of your life. Your subconscious listens more carefully to repetition than to logic. It doesn't care what you know to be true. It cares what you repeat the most. You can tell yourself intellectually that you deserve success. But if emotionally you keep repeating fear, scarcity, self-doubt, and unworthiness, your subconscious will follow the emotional repetition, not the intellectual one. This is why people feel divided inside. One part of them wants better, but the deeper part is still repeating the old beliefs, and the subconscious always obeys the deeper repetition. You've been told that change is hard, but change isn't hard. Repetition makes it hard. You're not fighting your current situation. You're fighting the accumulated weight of everything you've repeated to yourself over the years. The identity you built through repetition doesn't want to disappear, because familiar patterns feel safer to the subconscious, even if they are painful. That's why self-sabotage feels comfortable. That's why doubt feels natural. That's why negativity feels believable. That's why old habits feel automatic. You're not weak, you're repeating the wrong patterns. The good news is that the subconscious can be reprogrammed the same way it was programmed, through repetition. Not loud repetition, not forced repetition, not desperate repetition, but steady, calm, consistent repetition that feels emotionally real. The subconscious learns through emotional resonance. If you repeat something with no feeling, it doesn't sink in. If you repeat something inconsistently, the old pattern remains stronger. But if you repeat a new belief over and over, especially in a relaxed, receptive state, like the moments before sleep, the subconscious begins updating its internal blueprint. This is why listening to content like this at night is powerful. You're giving your mind new loops to rehearse. You're replacing the old script with a new one. You're feeding your subconscious instructions rather than complaints. You're shaping identity through repetition, instead of letting identity shape itself through old memories. You're using the mechanics of the mind correctly, instead of letting your emotional defaults run the show. Repetition doesn't just build beliefs, it builds behavior. When you repeatedly remind yourself that you're capable, you begin acting like someone capable. When you repeatedly affirm that you deserve growth, you begin seeking environments that support growth. When you repeatedly acknowledge your own progress, your mind stops ignoring your wins and actually starts building on them. When you repeatedly tell yourself that you're allowed to rise, the subconscious begins treating rising as the new normal, instead of something exceptional. This is how repetition becomes self-fulfilling. But this process works in the opposite direction too. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you're stuck, you reinforce stuckness. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you're overwhelmed, your mind amplifies overwhelm, even in simple situations. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you always get hurt, you'll interpret every ambiguous moment as a threat. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you're behind, you'll create urgency even when none is needed. Repetition is not neutral. It shapes everything. It is the architect of your identity, the author of your beliefs, the quiet force directing your behavior. Tonight you begin repeating different things. Not cheesy affirmations, but identity-level truths. Phrases that carry emotional weight. Messages that speak directly to the subconscious. You don't repeat them to convince yourself. You repeat them to retrain your internal patterns. You repeat them because your subconscious is listening, absorbing, reorganizing, and reshaping itself around whatever it hears clearly and consistently. You begin repeating thoughts that feel aligned with who you want to become, not who you've been forced to be. You begin repeating beliefs that support your growth instead of your fear. You begin repeating messages that strengthen your confidence instead of your insecurity. You begin repeating truths that help you evolve rather than stay stuck. And over time, not instantly, not magically, but gradually and predictably, you will see the shift. You will notice the internal changes first. Your reactions will be calmer. Your decisions will be cleaner. Your emotional responses will be more balanced. Your energy will feel lighter. Your self-image will feel stronger. This is not wishful thinking. This is neuroscience. Repetition reorganizes neural pathways. It reshapes emotional patterns. It rewrites identity at the experiential level. The subconscious doesn't care about what you think you deserve. It cares about what you repeatedly declare through your focus, your attention, your internal dialogue, and your emotional reactions. So tonight, as you drift deeper into a calm state, understand that you are repeating new truths not because the old ones were true, but because the old ones were repeated long enough to feel normal. And now you are creating a new normal. A normal where you believe in your own ability to grow. A normal where you stop underestimating yourself. A normal where you treat progress as natural instead of rare. A normal where you see yourself as someone capable, deserving, evolving, and free from outdated emotional patterns. You become what you repeat. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, the things you're repeating are finally aligned with the person you're becoming. 6. Your habits are scripts. Your body follows automatically. Most people misunderstand habits. They think habits are simple actions. Waking up late, scrolling too long, procrastinating, overeating, avoiding discomfort, repeating the same mistakes in relationships, reacting the same way to stress, thinking the same thoughts every morning. They think habits are just behaviors, but the truth is much deeper and far more uncomfortable. Habits are scripts. Scripts your body and mind follow automatically, without conscious permission, because they were rehearsed so many times that your subconscious treats them as survival patterns, not choices. You are not performing your habits. Your habits are performing you. Every habit you have began as a decision, but repetition turned that decision into a neurological pathway, and over time that pathway became so deeply carved that your brain stopped asking for your approval. It simply runs the script. That's why you sometimes wake up and fall into the same patterns, even when you promised yourself you'd do better. That's why you repeat mistakes you logically understand, but emotionally don't know how to interrupt. That's why you feel guilty for not changing, even though you desperately want to. You're not battling motivation. You're battling a pre-recorded script. Your subconscious is running on autopilot. Your nervous system craves predictability. Predictability feels safe, so even if a habit is harmful, or limiting or destructive or draining, if it's familiar, your subconscious prefers it over the discomfort of change. That's why repeating negative habits feels easier than building new ones. Not because you're lazy, but because your mind interprets new as danger, even when new is better for you. The body resists unfamiliar scripts, not because you can't change, but because your subconscious is operating based on outdated programming designed to protect you, not elevate you. Think about how many habits you perform without thinking. The way you talk to yourself, the way you interpret other people's behavior, the way you assume outcomes before they happen, the way you automatically expect disappointment, the way you shrink in situations where you should expand, the way you sabotage good opportunities, because your internal script warns you not to trust them, the way you choose comfort, even though comfort has never brought you growth. These aren't random behaviors. They're ingrained scripts, coded into your neural pathways through repetition, emotional reinforcement, and unconscious compliance. Your body follows these scripts automatically because your subconscious believes they keep you safe. If you learned avoidance as a strategy, it will repeat avoidance. If you learned silence as a shield, it will repeat silence. If you learned emotional detachment as protection, it will repeat detachment. If you learn self-doubt as a default, it will repeat self-doubt. Not because these habits are helpful now, but because they once kept you stable in environments that were unpredictable, overwhelming, or emotionally unsafe. But the problem is this: habits designed for survival become barriers when you're trying to grow. The same patterns that protected you in the past now suffocate your potential. The same scripts that kept you safe now prevent you from evolving. And you won't break these habits by willpower alone. Because habits don't live in the conscious mind, they live in the subconscious. The part of you that uses emotion, repetition, and association to decide who you are and what you do. This is why changing habits feels like rewiring your entire identity. It's not just doing something different, it's becoming someone who responds differently. It's teaching your subconscious a new script. And teaching a new script requires more than intention. It requires consistent reconditioning. You have to expose your mind to a new pattern long enough that the old one weakens from lack of use. That's how habits die, not by force, but by starvation. When you stop feeding an old pattern with attention, emotion, and repetition, it dissolves. Tonight, your subconscious is open in a way it rarely is. During the day, your body is relaxed, your guard is down, your nervous system is softer, your mind is quieter. This is the perfect time to introduce new scripts, the kind that will support your future instead of repeating your past. You're planting seeds, and the subconscious absorbs seeds effortlessly when the body is still. This is the moment where new programming can take root. Understand this: habits are not conscious decisions. They are emotional memories stored in your body. Every time you repeat a behavior, the body stores the emotional feeling attached to it. That feeling becomes a cue. The cue triggers the behavior. The behavior reinforces the identity. The identity strengthens the script, and the script becomes automatic. You wake up one day wondering why you can't break free, but you don't realize you're following a script that was written years ago, in a different chapter of your life, with different circumstances, different needs, different pressures, and different emotional limitations. But you're not the same person anymore. The scripts that shaped you when you were younger, scared, overwhelmed, or emotionally inexperienced are not the scripts you need to become the version of yourself that exists in your potential. The old scripts served their purpose. They kept you alive in places where you didn't feel emotionally safe, but they are outdated, and outdated scripts don't deserve obedience. When your subconscious realizes this, it begins to release its attachment to the old patterns. It begins to loosen its grip on the habits that kept you small. It begins to recognize that you're capable of more than the scripts suggest. And this recognition is the first step toward transformation. Not the transformation itself, but the internal permission to change. Habits are not broken by force. They dissolve when the subconscious is convinced that a new pattern is safer than the old one. Safety isn't physical safety, it's emotional safety. Your subconscious needs to feel that growth will not destroy you, overwhelm you, or expose you. That's why calm reprogramming works. You're not pressuring your mind, you're guiding it. You're not yelling at your habits, you're replacing them. You're not fighting yourself, you're teaching yourself. And the body responds to teaching far better than it responds to force. Think about how many times you tried to break a habit by pushing yourself, forcing yourself, shaming yourself, relying on temporary motivation, and think about how quickly you fell back. That wasn't failure, that was neurological resistance. The subconscious doesn't change through pressure, it changes through repetition, wrapped in emotional safety. The habit becomes irrelevant when the mind sees a better alternative, repeated often enough. Tonight you're showing your subconscious a different way of functioning. You're planting internal cues that will influence your behavior tomorrow. You're building new associations, movement instead of stagnation, intention instead of autopilot, clarity instead of confusion, self-trust instead of fear. These are not affirmations, they are future scripts. And when repeated gently over time, they become the automatic behaviors your body follows without hesitation. This is how change actually happens. You don't force yourself to wake up differently. You teach your subconscious that waking up differently feels normal. You don't push yourself to make better decisions. You train your internal patterns to prefer those decisions. You don't bully yourself into discipline. You create an inner environment where discipline feels natural instead of threatening. You don't fight procrastination. You remove its emotional reward. You don't chase motivation. You build consistency into your identity. You don't try to change your habits. You become a person whose habits reflect the next version of you. Your subconscious is learning that it no longer needs to cling to the old scripts. It's learning that the version of you who created those patterns is gone. It's learning that you're safe now, not emotionally unsafe like before, not surrounded by the same circumstances, not limited in the same ways. The environment is different. You are different. And the moment your subconscious accepts that, the old habits begin to weaken. This is why right now, in this calm state, with your breathing steady and your mind open, is the perfect moment to reprogram. Habits are stored in the unconscious layers of your nervous system, and you're speaking directly to that layer right now, bypassing resistance, bypassing survival instincts, bypassing fear, bypassing the mental noise that usually blocks change. You stir telling your subconscious, through tone, through emotion, through intention, through silence. I'm ready for a different script. And the subconscious listens. It always listens. It never sleeps. This is where transformation begins. Not in the external world, but in the internal scripts your mind rehearses silently. And tonight, those scripts are changing. 7. You are capable of reinventing yourself completely. There is a moment in every person's life, a silent, private moment, when they realize they are living as a version of themselves they never consciously chose. It hits slowly, like a shift in temperature, an awareness that creeps in without drama. The identity you're carrying does not match the person you could become. And yet, even when you feel that misalignment, you stay loyal to the old version. Not because you're weak, but because the subconscious clings to the familiar, even when the familiar is suffocating. Reinvention feels dangerous to the mind that survived by staying the same. But here's the truth. Your subconscious has never fully understood. You are not a fixed being. You are not trapped in the version of yourself that the past sculpted out of fear, out of circumstance, out of survival. Reinvention is not only possible, it is natural. It's part of being human. You are designed to evolve, shed layers, outgrow identities, and step into new shapes of yourself. What stops you is not inability, it's loyalty. Loyalty to the stories you've been telling yourself. Loyalty to the emotional responses you rehearsed. Loyalty to the wounds you normalized. Loyalty to the limits someone else handed you. Loyalty to an identity built during a time when you didn't know any better. Reinvention begins the moment you understand this one thing. You don't need permission to become someone else. You don't need validation. You don't need certainty. You don't need perfection. You don't need a specific moment of clarity. You don't need anyone to agree with your transformation. You don't even need to completely believe in the new version yet. You simply need to allow the possibility that you are more than the person your past tried to shape. You've spent years being shaped by forces you didn't choose. Family expectations, social environments, emotional wounds, disappointments, criticisms, internalized shame, childhood memories, failed relationships, mistakes you still carry as if they define you. These things sculpted your behavior, your reactions, your self-image. And even though those experiences are over, their imprint remains. Your subconscious has been guarding an identity that might not even fit you anymore. It's been assuming that the version of you who struggled is the version you still are. But listen carefully. The version of you who created those patterns is gone. You're not that child anymore. You're not that teenager anymore. You're not that overwhelmed adult from 5 years ago, or even 1 year ago. You have new awareness, new insight, new emotional strength, new understanding of yourself, but your subconscious is slow to update. It still thinks you're living in the old emotional environment. It still thinks those wounds are relevant. It still thinks those limitations protect you. This is why you sometimes feel like two people, the person you want to become and the person you feel chained to. Reinvention is the process of unlearning that old self, gently, steadily, consistently, until the subconscious understands that you are ready for a different identity. Not one shaped by fear, but one shaped by intention. Most people never reinvent themselves because they believe identity is permanent. They think, this is just who I am. But identity is nothing more than repeated thoughts, repeated actions, repeated beliefs, repeated emotional reactions, repeated interpretations, and anything repeated can be replaced. You can become someone new, not by erasing your past, but by refusing to let your past be the blueprint for your future. Reinvention starts internally, not externally. Before anything changes in your life, something changes in your self-concept. You stop seeing yourself as fragile, and you start seeing yourself as adaptable. You stop seeing yourself as unlucky, and you start seeing yourself as responsible for your path. You stop seeing yourself as the person who was hurt, and you start seeing yourself as the person who can heal. You stop seeing yourself as someone defined by circumstances, and you start seeing yourself as someone capable of shaping them. Your subconscious needs to be shown the new version of you through feeling, not force. That's why listening to this at night is powerful. Your body is relaxed, your mind is open, your defenses are low, your nervous system is calmer. In this state, identity can shift without resistance. You're not fighting the old self, you're allowing a new one to emerge. Reinvention doesn't happen in a single epiphany. It happens through a series of subtle internal agreements. Agreements like, I sit not living by the rules of my old environment anymore. I can release identities that were built in survival mode. I sit am allowed to choose who I become now, not who I was then. I don't need to be loyal to the version of myself that was created by pain. I capable of becoming someone I never met yet. Every time you repeat these truths, every time you let them sink into your emotional core, your subconscious begins to reorganize. It weakens the neural pathways, supporting the old identity. It opens new pathways for confidence, courage, clarity, self-respect, and expansion. It begins treating growth as familiar, instead of threatening, and slowly, without force, without pressure, you start shifting your behavior. You start making choices that align with the person you want to be, not the person you've been. The subconscious begins following your lead, instead of dragging you backward. Reinvention feels like an identity shedding. Old fears stop fitting. Old habits stop making sense. Old insecurities stop feeling convincing. Old limitations stop feeling logical. Old environments stop resonating. Old relationships stop aligning. You start seeing yourself with clearer eyes, through truth instead of memory. You feel the old version loosening its hold as the new version steps forward with quiet confidence. You don't become unrecognizable overnight. You become unrecognizable gradually, through small internal shifts that accumulate until you look back one day and realize you've outgrown versions of yourself you once thought were permanent. Reinvention is not dramatic. It's subtle. It's not loud. It's silent. It's not chaotic. It's precise. It's not external first. It's internal first. You are capable of reinventing yourself completely, not partially, not conditionally, completely. You can become someone whose self-worth is stable, whose decisions come from clarity rather than fear, whose habits support their goals, whose boundaries protect their peace, whose inner voice encourages rather than attacks, whose life reflects intentional growth instead of unconscious repetition. This is not wishful thinking. This is neurological reality. The brain rewires itself when identity shifts. The subconscious rewrites itself when emotional truth shifts. Reinvention is not magic. It's biology aligned with intention. Right now, as you listen in this calm, receptive state, your subconscious is absorbing the possibility of a new identity. It is relaxing its grip on who you used to be. It is opening space for who you can become. It is recognizing that the person you are becoming is emotionally safer, more grounded, more aware, more empowered than the person you were forced to be in the past. Reinvention is not a leap. It sips a transition, and you are already in it. Tonight marks the turning point. Tonight is where the old self begins to dissolve. Tonight is where the new self begins to form. Tonight is where you stop being loyal to a version of yourself that was built in survival mode. Tonight is where you accept that your identity is yours to shape now, not your past's, not your environment's, not anyone else's. You are capable of reinventing yourself completely, and your subconscious is finally ready to let you. 8. Your future depends on what you do with your inner narrative. Your future doesn't depend on luck, timing, circumstances, or some perfect opportunity arriving at the right moment. Your future depends on one thing only: the inner narrative you choose to carry forward. People talk about habits, discipline, mindset, motivation, but beneath all of that lies something far more powerful and far more neglected: the quiet, continuous story running in the background of your mind. That story determines what you think you deserve, what you pursue, what you tolerate, what you fear, what you abandon, what you repeat, and what you ultimately become. It is the most influential force in your life, and most people never even realize they're the ones writing it. Your inner narrative is the lens through which you interpret everything. Two people can experience the same event and walk away with completely different meanings, simply because their narratives are different. One sees a challenge, another sees defeat. One sees rejection, another sees redirection. One sees risk, another sees possibility. One sees their past as a prison, another sees it as raw material for transformation. The difference isn't intelligence or luck. It's the story they tell themselves about who they are and what their life means. But here's the problem. Your inner narrative didn't begin with you. It began with the voices you grew up around, with the emotional environment that shaped you, with the experiences you didn't have the tools to understand, with the interpretations you made when you were younger and more fragile. And because the subconscious records emotional experiences with incredible precision, those early interpretations became the foundation of your narrative. You didn't choose the story. The story was chosen for you by circumstances you had no control over. As you grew older, that narrative followed you. It lingered behind every decision. It influenced what you thought was possible and what you thought was impossible. It controlled how you reacted to challenges, how you saw opportunities, how you dealt with disappointment. And because the subconscious favors repetition, you unknowingly reinforced that narrative through your behavior. You acted in alignment with the story, and every action created more evidence that the story was true. It's a loop, a self-fulfilling cycle, and it continues unless you intervene. This is why your future depends on your inner narrative. Because until the narrative changes, your patterns won't. Until the narrative changes, your confidence won't. Until the narrative changes, your decisions won't. Until the narrative changes, you can fill your life with goals, routines, affirmations, resolutions, and still feel like nothing actually changes. Because all those external efforts are being filtered through an identity built on an outdated story. When your inner narrative says, "I don't deserve good things," you sabotage them. When it says, "I'm meant to struggle," you overlook opportunities. When it says, "People always hurt me," you mistrust the people who could help you. When it says, "I can't change," you repeat the same patterns. When it says, "I'm behind," you drown in pressure instead of progress. When it says, "Nothing works out," you find problems even where solutions exist. The narrative shapes the future long before the future arrives. But here's the truth. Your subconscious rarely hears. Narratives are not permanent. They're not destiny. They're not unchangeable. They are interpretations, and interpretations can be rewritten at any moment. The story you've been carrying is not the story you must continue carrying. It was created by a past version of you who did the best they could with the understanding they had. But you are not that version anymore. You have more awareness now, more perspective, more inner strength, more emotional intelligence, more clarity about what you want and what you don't want. Yet your subconscious still operates according to the old story because you've never given it a new one to follow. You've never sat down, mentally or emotionally, and said, "This narrative no longer fits me." People assume that changing a story means forgetting the past, but that's not how it works. You don't erase the old story. You reinterpret it. You give it new meaning. You integrate it into a larger narrative that empowers you instead of limiting you. Your subconscious listens to meaning more than memory. If you reinterpret the meaning, the memory loses its power. You don't need to pretend your past was good. You simply need to stop letting it define your future. You have the ability, right here, right now, to shift the internal story your subconscious uses to guide your life. And that shift begins with one simple understanding. You are the author now. You can choose a narrative where struggle becomes strength, not identity. Where pain becomes wisdom, not limitation. Where past mistakes become lessons, not definitions. Where failures become stepping stones, not verdicts. Where rejection becomes redirection, not proof of unworthiness. Where growth becomes your default, not your exception. This narrative becomes your blueprint, the internal architecture for your future. When your subconscious accepts this new blueprint, everything else changes with surprising ease. Decisions become clearer because they're aligned with a self-image that believes in growth. Opportunities become visible because you're no longer filtering them through doubt. Relationships become healthier because you're not operating from fear or scarcity. Patterns from your past lose power because the new narrative doesn't support them. You begin gravitating toward environments that reflect your potential instead of your wounds. People think the future changes through action alone, but action is the final step. The first step, the foundation beneath every decision you make, is the story you believe about who you are. If the narrative is broken, the future collapses. If the narrative is rewritten, the future expands. Tonight, in this calm, receptive state, your subconscious is absorbing something it has never fully accepted before. The authority to rewrite your story belongs to you, not to your past, not to the people who shaped your old beliefs, not to the mistakes you've made, not to the fears you inherited, not to the environments you survived. The power belongs solely to you now, and the moment your subconscious realizes this, the chains of your old narrative begin to dissolve. This is where reinvention deepens, not just as a shift in identity, but as a shift in meaning, a shift in how you interpret your life, a shift in how you see yourself, a shift in what you expect from tomorrow. You're giving your subconscious new instructions, new interpretations, new emotional associations, and repetition of these interpretations will shape your future far more than any external change ever could. Your inner narrative has been carried for years, maybe decades, but narratives are not set in stone. They are living, breathing stories that evolve when you evolve. And right now, listening to this in the quiet, with your mind open and your body soft, you are creating the conditions for that evolution. You're showing your subconscious a future that reflects the person you want to become, not the person you were forced to be. Your future depends on what you do with your inner narrative. And tonight, you are making the choice your past self never had the strength or awareness to make. You start choosing to change the story. 9. Real change begins when you stop arguing with your potential. There's a moment you've experienced countless times, but you probably never had the words for it. That subtle internal conflict, that quiet tug of war between who you are and who you know you could be. You feel it when you hesitate at opportunities that excite you. You feel it when you finish something meaningful and immediately downplay it. You feel it when you imagine a better version of yourself and instantly shrink, as if wanting more is somehow unreasonable. You feel it when your dreams whisper one truth and your doubts shout another. That conflict is not laziness, and it's not fear of hard work. It's the internal argument you've been having with your own potential. Most people don't transform because they never stop arguing with the part of themselves that wants a bigger life. They negotiate with their potential until it becomes small enough to fit inside their comfort zone. They explain away their desires as unrealistic. They convince themselves that wanting more is dangerous, irresponsible, or selfish. They attach guilt to ambition and convince themselves that staying the same is wiser than becoming someone greater. Not because they dislike growth, but because growth threatens the identity they've rehearsed for years. Your potential has been speaking to you your entire life. It shows up in the form of intuition, curiosity, moments of inspiration, sudden ideas, unexpected motivation, or glimpses of a life you want but haven't yet experienced. But every time potential speaks, your subconscious counters it with the same old arguments. Who do you think you are? You're not ready. It's too late. You don't have what it takes. People like you don't succeed like that. You'll embarrass yourself. You'll fail again. These arguments aren't logical. They're habitual. They're recycled phrases left over from moments when you genuinely didn't have the strength or awareness to grow, but you kept repeating them until they felt like truth. The tragedy is that many people never realize that these arguments are optional. They think they're hearing intuition when really they're hearing fear. They think they're being realistic when really they're being conditioned. They think they're protecting themselves when really they're blocking the very path their life is trying to open. Every moment of doubt, hesitation, and self-sabotage is nothing more than the subconscious defending the version of you it's familiar with. Potential requires expansion. Your subconscious prefers repetition. That's the internal conflict. Real change, the kind that sticks, the kind that reshapes identity, begins the moment you stop negotiating with your limitations. It begins when you stop giving your doubts more power than your desires. It begins when you stop explaining why you can't and start considering what might happen if you did. It begins when you stop assuming your past has authority over your future. It begins when you stop treating your potential as an enemy you need to defeat and start treating it as the truest version of yourself trying to break free. Your potential is not a fantasy. It's not a delusion. It's the part of you that has never been expressed because your narrative, your habits, your fears, and your environment kept you from stepping into it. Potential is not built. It's uncovered. It's excavated. It's revealed when old layers fall away. Every time you feel a pull towards something greater, that pull is not random. It's your deeper self, reminding you of the person you're capable of being, the person beneath the conditioning, the trauma responses, the outdated identity, the inherited beliefs. When you argue with your potential, you're not being cautious. You're suppressing growth. You're denying the world access to the version of you that actually matches your abilities. You're placing importance on fears formed long before you had the awareness you have now. You're prioritizing the comfort of your past over the expansion of your future. And the harsh truth is this: every time you say "I can't," you're strengthening the part of you that fears growth. Every time you say "maybe later," you're teaching your subconscious that your dreams are optional. Every time you avoid the thing you know you should do, you're rehearsing the identity you're trying to escape. You cannot become the next version of yourself while still defending the limitations of the old one. This is why transformation feels so uncomfortable. Not because becoming someone new is hard, but because letting go of who you've been feels unfamiliar. The subconscious resists unfamiliarity. It sees expansion as danger. But that resistance is not a signal to stop. It's a sign you're approaching the edge of your old identity. And that edge is exactly where reinvention begins. Real change is quiet. It doesn't happen in a single moment of motivation. It happens in small internal shifts, when your potential speaks, and instead of arguing back, you listen. When your fear whispers limitations, and you choose not to accept them. When you feel the urge to shrink, and you pause instead of obeying. When you allow yourself to imagine the life you want without immediately killing the thought. These internal moments seem small, but they are the cracks through which your future enters. Reinvention doesn't begin with action. It begins with willingness. The willingness to stop arguing with the part of you that knows you're capable of more. The willingness to consider the possibility that your best days are not behind you. The willingness to admit that the version of you living in your imagination is not unrealistic. It's inevitable if you stop sabotaging the path to get there. You already know the direction your life wants to move in. You've felt it for years. You've seen glimpses. You've had urges, ideas, visions, or desires that won't leave you alone. That's not coincidence. That's alignment. That's your potential trying to guide you, even when you resist. Your future self has been calling you, but your old self has been answering the phone. Tonight, that begins to change. Tonight, your subconscious is learning something it has never fully absorbed until now. Your potential is not a threat. It is not a danger. It is not a risk. It is your natural state. It is not asking you to become someone else. It's asking you to stop pretending to be smaller than you are. Potential is simply the unexpressed truth of who you've always been. And the moment you stop arguing with that truth, everything in your life begins to shift. Your confidence, your decisions, your emotional patterns, your relationships, your habits, your opportunities. The internal conflict dissolves. The hesitation weakens. The excuses lose credibility. The fear becomes quieter. Momentum builds not because you force it, but because you're no longer resisting it. Your future begins the moment you stop negotiating with your limitations. And tonight, your subconscious is receiving the message clearly. Your potential is not your enemy. It sits your path. As this night settles around you, and the world outside your thoughts grows soft and distant, your mind has begun something it hasn't done in years. It has opened, not in a dramatic way, not through force or pressure or sudden revelation, but slowly, quietly, the way a flower opens when it finally feels safe enough to unfold. There's a different kind of stillness inside you right now, a stillness that isn't empty but spacious, like you've made room for a new version of yourself to finally have somewhere to breathe. Every part of you that listened tonight, every fear, every doubt, every habit, every old belief, every wounded version of you that has been carrying the weight of your past, has softened just enough for transformation to begin, not to finish, but to begin. Because all real change starts in the subconscious. In this exact state, a quiet, relaxed moment, where the emotional noise fades and the truth becomes easier to hear. Your subconscious doesn't care about what your life looked like before tonight. It doesn't hold grudges. It doesn't judge your past. It doesn't cling to old mistakes. It simply takes what you feed it and shapes your identity around it. And tonight you've given it something radically different. A new framework, a new emotional atmosphere, a new narrative, a new vision of who you are allowed to become. You've shown it that the old stories were never the full truth. You've shown it that the fears it carried were born in environments that no longer exist. You've shown it that you are stronger, wiser, more capable, and more aware than the person you used to be. You've shown it that your habits were scripts created from survival, not destiny. You've shown it that your potential is not a threat, but a calling. You've shown it that your future is not a repetition of your past, but a reflection of the internal world you are now choosing. This is how a new identity begins. Not in loud moments of motivation, not in sudden bursts of energy, not in dramatic changes that burn out by morning. A new identity begins in nights like this, when your body sinks into stillness, your breathing deepens, your mind opens, and your subconscious listens without resistance. These are the moments when the seeds of transformation are planted, seeds that grow slowly, quietly, and inevitably. Tomorrow you might wake up feeling slightly different, not dramatically, but subtly. You might notice your thoughts are a little clearer. You might feel a bit more grounded. You might pause before reacting in old ways. You might feel a pull toward behaviors that align with who you want to be, instead of who you've been. These small internal shifts are not accidents. They're evidence. Evidence that the subconscious has begun to reorganize itself. Evidence that the lessons you absorb tonight have already taken root. And over time, night after night, repetition after repetition, these internal shifts become your new normal. The old identity begins to fade, not because you force it to disappear, but because you simply stop feeding it. The habits that once controlled you begin to loosen their grip. The doubts that once felt so heavy begin to lose their authority. The fears that once dictated your decisions begin to feel less convincing. The internal barriers you once believed were permanent begin to crumble. This is how reinvention actually works. Not through sudden breakthroughs, but through a gradual unlearning of everything that no longer fits you. Not through intense pressure, but through consistent emotional alignment. Not through force, but through permission. Tonight you gave yourself permission. Permission to grow. Permission to change. Permission to become someone new. Permission to release the outdated emotional layers that once protected you, but now restrict you. Permission to rewrite the narrative that shapes your destiny. Permission to stop arguing with your potential, and finally start listening to it. And as sleep begins to pull you deeper, your subconscious will continue the work. It will replay the truths you heard. It will soften its attachment to the past. It will reorganize your internal patterns. It will begin treating growth as familiar, instead of frightening. It will reshape your identity around intention rather than survival. You don't need to do anything else tonight. You don't need to rehearse the lessons. You don't need to force yourself to remember every word. You don't need to control the process. Your only job now is to rest. Let your breath slow. Let your body grow heavy. Let your thoughts drift. Let the old identity dissolve gently, like a shadow fading with the sunrise. The version of you who wakes up tomorrow will be slightly different, not because your circumstances changed overnight, but because you changed. You shifted internally. You built new space inside yourself. You invited a new identity to begin forming. You quieted the noise long enough for truth to take root. And whether you notice it immediately or not, this night will mark a turning point inside you. A quiet turning point, but a powerful one. You are becoming someone your past self never believed was possible. Someone your younger self always needed. Someone your future self will be proud of. Let sleep take you now. Let the work continue in the silence. Let your mind rebuild itself into a place where your future can finally grow. Good night. You're becoming the person you were always meant to be.